Hello, everyone, and welcome to Virtual Family Day Wings. I'm Emily, here from the Museum of the North, and today with us we have Derek Sykes, who is the Curator of Insects and Professor of Entomology at the museum and the university. Hi, Derek. Thank you for joining us today.
Hey, Emily. My pleasure.
So let's start with a pretty basic question. Why do some insects have wings and others don't?
That's a great question. Insects were the first animals to evolve wings. To understand that question, we have to look at why they even have wings, right? Not just why they don't, but why do they have them? They evolved wings way back before the dinosaurs appeared. We're talking 300 million years or more. I know the first fossils of insects on land were about 400 million years, and they did not have wings. So it took a while before wings appeared. And so there were all these insects that didn't have wings then, and they still don't. So that we have the descendants of those wingless insects with us today. Some you may even be familiar with as silverfish or firebrats, which are common little insects that live in buildings. And they don't have wings, and they evolved from these ancient insects that never had wings. They didn't lose them, they just never even had them. However, there's quite a few other insects that don't have wings that lost them. They descended from ancestors who had wings. Common examples of these are things like lice and fleas. These are parasitic insects that live on their host, and their host travels and moves them around. So the insects lost their wings because they don't need them. We see this happen in evolution all the time. Animals living in caves become blind because there's no point in having eyes if it's too dark to see. Wings have been lost a number of times in parasitic insects. And we also see this happen in certain beetle groups pretty frequently. And I do a lot of research in the Aleutian Islands here in Alaska, where it's very windy and there's a lot of ocean all around these very small islands. So insects that tend to be on those islands, there's a lot of beetles that are completely wingless. It's a very different explanation than you have with the parasitic insects. They're wingless because if they fly, they tend to get blown off the island and end up in the ocean, and they don't leave any offspring. So if they happen to be born with non-functional wings or no wings at all, they have a higher chance of surviving. That's the shortest way I can answer that question.
It's interesting. I was thinking about this question because in relationship to birds, because birds all have wings. Some birds are flightless, but they still have wings.
Right.
So I was wondering why some insects are flightless, but they don't have the wings.
We have both completely wingless insects, and we have insects that are flightless but have wings. So we have the both.
Really?
Yeah. So things like fleas are completely wingless, but there are other insects, like I have a grad student studying snow scorpion flies. Which anybody watching this, if you find any snow scorpion flies, which are little about 5 millimeter long insects that will come out in late April and in September, and they'll sometimes be on the snow, but they're usually in moss. They are flightless, and the males the wings have been modified into these grabbing organs. They're almost like appendages with spines, and they help hold on to the female during mating. But they're they're completely useless for flight. And the female doesn't have any wings at all other than these two little pads that are they're vestigial, they're remnant of former wings.
So that actually leads really well into my next question. How do insects use their wings? I mean, there's flying, obviously, and then there's many different kinds of flying, but then there's also uses of wings that aren't related to flying. What are some ways insects use their wings?
There's so many different ways. Yeah, so there's thermoregulation. Like you'll see a butterfly basking in the sun, putting its wings out. You'll see communication. So communicating with a mating partner or communicating with a potential predator saying, hey, I don't taste good. And that could be an honest signal, like a monarch butterfly signaling with its bright colors on its wings. Or it could be a dishonest signal where it's an insect that is telling a predator, I don't taste good, when they actually do taste good. That's called mimicry. There's all these different ways that insects use their wings. Some of them have even used them for sailing. there are insects that will sit on the top of the water and hold their wings up, and the wind just pushes them across the top of the water. There's a lot of different ways they're used. I guess related to this topic of using wings, you were talking about flapping and gliding. There is one group of insects, the tiniest of the beetles. They're among the smallest of the insects. They're called feather wing beetles. They were really cool because their wings actually are feather-like.
Oh, wow.
The beetles are so tiny. A lot of them are less than 1 millimeter in size. Some of them are smaller than like an amoeba. But they're so small and so lightweight that to them air is thicker, provides more resistance. So if you've ever seen sunlight coming through a window and you see dust sort of floating in the sunbeam, that's what it's like for these beetles. They're actually kind of swimming through the air using their wings because they don't need to flap their wings to stay up. They're so lightweight that they kind of float in the air, just like an animal floating in the water. So that's another cool way that insects have special wings.
How do you study insects so tiny like that? Like, how do you even find them? I assume microscopes are involved in some way.
Yeah, definitely. So we find them usually in traps. They're usually too small to find with your eyes. So they end up in a trap of some kind, and then we bring that material into the laboratory and put it under microscopes. And a normal dissecting microscope isn't strong enough to really study these things. You have to get them under a compound scope and use much higher magnification. Being a beetle specialist, I can't forget to mention one of the more important ways that insects use their wings, and that's for protection. So beetles have taken an entire set of wings, and they're useless for flight, but they're used as armor. They hide their flight wings underneath the front wings. And the front wings, we call them elytra. They don't even really look like wings anymore.
We often see like ladybugs and it looks like they don't have wings, and all of a sudden, whoop, there they are.
Yep, exactly.
So that does bring up another question of the different shapes of insect wings. So like if you look at a dragonfly, they're kind of long and skinny. If you look at a butterfly, they're nice and big. What are some of the different shapes of wings and how do they function in different ways?
When wings first evolved, which is like the dragonfly you just mentioned, there's some insects that started to have 3 pairs of wings. We don't know if the first pair was ever fully functional, but most insects have 2 pairs of wings, like a dragonfly. So a total of 4 wings, 2 on each side. And dragonflies and a few other insects that are related to them, they were among the first insects to fly, those wings beat independently. So the front ones and the hind ones work separately. Whereas most other insects that have 4 wings, things like wasps, bees, butterflies, moths, they link the front and hind wings together using some various forms of hooks. What that it does is it causes them to beat together. So instead of independent, they're working together. Even though they have 4 wings, they're behaving as if they have only 2 wings. So those are 2 big differences in how insects use their wings. Dragonflies are incredible flyers, so agile, so fast, able to turn on a dime. Adult dragonflies are different than a lot of other insects. They spend a huge amount of time feeding. Once you get certain point in insect evolution, most of the feeding starts to happen in the larval stage. A lot of insects use their wings as adults, not so much for catching food as for dispersing. That's how they find new habitats and mates and move around. Dragonflies use their wings to find food. A lot of other insects use their wings to disperse.
Lots of different ways to use their wings.
Sound production too. Female mosquito that buzzes. It's only the female that makes that noise. Male mosquitoes don't make that buzzing noise. They're using their wings to make sound to attract mates. And crickets, right?
Crickets, that's the one. That's what I was thinking of.
But we do have grasshoppers that do a little of that as well. In Alaska, we don't have singing insects other than the mosquitoes, and nobody loves that song. And we do have a few grasshoppers that make a little noise, but it's pretty hard to hear them. It's not like if you go to the lower 48 or the tropics, there's singing insects, the crickets and the katydids that are
Mm-hmm.
there's a loud chorus at nighttime.
How does color play into all of this? Because some insects have really colorful wings, like the obvious example is butterflies, but some have transparent wings, and I know some flies have iridescent wings. So how does color play into the whole wings angle?
Right. Yeah, it's very much a part of that communication, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're either trying to communicate, and butterflies are not all colorful, right? So that's
Mm-hmm.
actually a question that we often ask: how do you tell a butterfly from a moth? And often people will say, "Oh, butterflies are pretty." Well, there are some pretty brown butterflies out there that don't have any bright colors. The colors, whether they are bright and colorful or whether they're brown and drab, usually have some important role in their life history, whether that be camouflage,
Mm-hmm.
hiding them from predators, or thermoregulation. The colors are darker on the wings in order to absorb more sunlight.
Mm-hmm.
If you've ever worn a black outfit out in the hot sun, you'll be a lot hotter than your buddy wearing a white outfit. The bright colors, we already talked about attracting mates or scaring away predators. Iridescence it's not fully understood. There's a bunch of ideas about it, but iridescence is sort of metallic,
Mm-hmm.
almost rainbow colors that sometimes happen that differ depending on what angle you're looking at the wing. We have some butterflies in the museum collection that I show people that when I hold up the tray, if I turn it like one way, everybody goes, wow, and I turn it the other way and it looks totally drab. It's not entirely sure what's going on with that. Why did that evolve that way? Is it a form of camouflage that it looks a little, in a forest, you might have a lot of, particularly a rainforest, a lot of shimmering water on leaves. And so you end up with a lot of reflectance. And so maybe these insects with this iridescent metallic color can sort of hide among all these shimmering leaves and other things. But it is very eye-catching to humans. I mean, when we see a butterfly like that, and the morpho is a great example, that the female is a drab brown color, but the male is bright blue and has this metallic reflection. When it closes its wings, it almost disappears in the dark forest, but when it opens those wings, it's like this flash of blue. So probably attracting mates. Some butterflies are even clear wings. They call them clear wing butterflies, and that they don't have colors on their wings at all. You can see the vein outline, but you look right through the wings the same way you can with a dragonfly, for example. Even mosquitoes, I remember taking a photograph of one of these snow mosquitoes that's going to be coming out pretty soon, and beautiful rainbow colors coming off the wings at a certain angle. Like if you look at it another way, it's totally clear. And mosquitoes have little scales too.
They do.
Yeah, just like moths and butterflies.
I guess I've never looked that closely at a mosquito's wing. Another question I had is about the development of wings. If you think again about a butterfly or even a mosquito, when they're a larva or a nymph, they don't have wings, and then they develop them as an adult. Or I think it's some ant species where only the queen ants have wings. So, and the males. Why would that be? Why would they not have wings as a baby and then grow wings as an adult?
So that's a good question. One idea is that the larva of a lot of these insects is the feeding stage, right? And the adult is the dispersal stage. By splitting the roles of eating versus dispersal into two body forms, they don't compete with one another. They're in different habitats doing different things. You don't worry about running out of food or resources. That's one idea. The ants that's something we didn't touch on yet, but you mentioned queen ants have wings. But they only have wings temporarily. When they emerge as an adult, what we call a gyne, who's a queen who hasn't mated yet, when they fly, they have their nuptial flight, and the males also fly. The males die soon after mating. Their only job in life is to fly, mate, and die. The queen and the workers do all the rest of the work. And the queen, she lands and tries to make a nest, and she bites her wings off. She's done with her wings. She doesn't need them anymore. She only has that one nuptial flight, and then she goes underground or in the log or whatever to make a nest and lay eggs.
If you don't need them anymore, why carry them around?
Exactly.
Let's get rid of it. Are there any insects that have wings before they're adults?
That is a thing, but it's a very weird thing too, because most insects, like 99.99% of insects that get wings, they only get wings when they become adult. So if you see wings on an insect, you can be almost guaranteed it's an adult insect. The one exception to that are the mayflies. So mayflies are aquatic. The adults live a very short amount of time, sometimes only a few hours. So it's the immature that does all the feeding and growing, and then the adult is around for a few hours just to mate, lay eggs, and then die. The weird thing about the mayflies is they'll emerge from the water, climb up on a stick or something, they will molt and become a winged, what we call a subimago, which means subadult. And then a little while later, they'll molt again. And so they'll have wings and then they'll molt. It's very strange. When an insect molts, it's basically shedding its skeleton. It's not just like a suit of armor. This skeleton is attached to their muscles on the inside of their body, and all of their parts are connected to the skeleton. So you have to disconnect everything and reconnect it to a new skeleton. It's a very traumatic and difficult thing. It's just really surprising to me that the mayflies get wings and then molt again. It seems like it's very difficult and challenging, and it's like, why build those wings if you're only going to a few hours later get rid of them and replace them with new wings? I think it's one of these examples of evolution. It works well enough that we're going to keep doing it because it doesn't cause huge problems, but all the other insects are pretty good evidence that it's a bad idea. You don't need to molt twice.
That's be a good research project for any budding scientists out there. That does bring up another good point. Why do we study insect wings? Why is it such an interesting field of study?
What we call in evolution and biology a key innovation. It's a characteristic that is seemingly linked to a huge success. Insects are the most successful of animals on the planet, having generated many millions of species ecologically on land. They usually constitute the majority of biomass, species, and individuals, even though they're kind of overlooked and we often think of them as an annoyance, but they are such a massive part of the ecosystem. Raises questions, how did they become so successful? Well, one of the answers is wings. We look at those insects that don't have wings, they're not that successful. There's not very many silverfish, even the fleas and lice that evolved to become parasites. They're not that successful because there's not very many hosts. Whereas all those other insects that are flying around the world, they have seemingly limitless opportunities to evolve and speciate and to find new habitats because they can fly. So that's one of the reasons, is understanding how the most successful group of animals on Earth became so successful. And wings is a huge part of that.
Having wings means you have a lot of choices. Why are moth wings fuzzy?
That's a great question. Moth wings and butterfly wings are covered with scales. If you look at them under a microscope, you'll see that the fuzziness is these very tiny scales, which are modified hairs. They're deciduous. It's just like a deciduous tree that drops its leaves. These scales are designed to come off. If you ever hold a moth or butterfly and touch its wings, you'll get scales on your fingers.
Yeah, it's like a little powder.
Yeah, like powder. You put that under a microscope and you'll see they're quite beautiful little objects. Now, why have that? Why have scales that come off? Well, one idea, and the one that I think is correct, is because of spiders. So spiders are an incredibly huge group of predatory animals who feed on flying insects, the majority of them. The ones that make webs and sit in their webs are catching flying insects. And the webs have sticky droplets on them. And when an insect hits that web and can get tangled up, a moth or a butterfly often will just shake loose and fly away because it'll leave some scales on the web, but the butterfly or moth is gone to live another day. That's one idea.
It's almost like, a lizard dropping its tail. Get rid of that body part and you're free. Do the butterflies and moths regrow those scales?
They do not regrow them. Yep.
So,
in order to regrow them, they would have to molt again.
So you can only be caught in a spider's web a few times before that's it.
Yep.
So I know you mentioned you're a beetle specialist. So what are a few of your favorite insects to study with or without wings?
Yeah, well, I love beetles. And the group I did my PhD on that I specialize on are called burying beetles. They are a fairly small group when it comes to insects in number of species. There's only about 70 in the world. They're called burying beetles because they bury a dead bird or mouse, a small vertebrate, in the ground. They work as male, female, sort of mother-father team of these burying beetles will dig under the dead bird or mouse or vole or whatever and bury it in the ground and make a crypt underground. And they will lay their eggs and parents, beetles, will stay down there with their larvae while the larvae feed on the dead bird or mouse. They can have it underground overnight, and by dawn, they'll have it completely concealed. The larvae will quickly feed on the bird or mouse, and in a matter of 10 days to 2 weeks, it'll be gone, and the larvae will crawl off to pupate and turn into adult beetles. There's all kinds of interesting aspects to their life history.
Do we have these burying beetles in Alaska?
Yes, we have 3 species of them in Alaska. There's 2 in the Fairbanks area. They can be easily found if you take a plastic container like this or any kind of yogurt container and put some rotten chicken in there and nail it to a tree. Just wait a day or two and check it regularly. You're going to find these beautiful, they're red and black. So their wing covers, the elytra, are red with, they're black with red bands on them. So they look quite striking. And sometimes people see them underneath, like if your cat kills a vole or something, you may turn over the vole and see them under there too. I've traveled all over the world to study those. I described a number of new species in that group. There's even an endangered species that is found across most of North America, but is now disappeared from most of North America. It's only in a few places. Really cool beetles.
So we should probably wrap up our conversation pretty soon. Do you have any final thoughts on insects and wings? Any words of wisdom?
Keep an eye out for insects this summer and even in the spring. As soon as it starts melting and we start seeing insects out there, it's going to be these adults who've spent the whole winter under the snow. Like the snow mosquitoes are going to show up. Keep an eye out for them. And if you find any snow scorpion flies, be sure to send us pictures or collect them or bring them in, because we're trying to find as many of those as possible. They're really cool because they have a long snout and they hop, but they don't fly.
I will definitely keep an eye out for those. Well, thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. I've learned so much. And so for everyone watching this at home, you can go to our Family Day website and they'll have more hands-on activities and more information all about wings. So I hope you have fun exploring wings and being curious.
Thanks.